What's going on, guys? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to this channel, we essentially talk about mental health through pop culture and introduce you to a few films along the way. My name is Captain Nostalgia, and today we're going to be talking about Kids versus Aliens. So this movie tells the story of a group of middle schoolers and their older sister. Older sister throws a house party and, well, aliens crash it. This movie, it kind of, if you're like me and you grew up in the era of Adult Swim origins where they kind of experimented, the first act of this movie feels like a live action version of home movies, and I really admired and really had a fun time with the first act of this movie. The acting's not the greatest in the first act of this movie, but it's a lot of fun, and this is where I feel like a lot of the fun is retained. And then as the movie kind of goes on, it slowly loses itself. Like, don't get me wrong, the acting in this is just, it's okay, it's fine, it's passable for what the movie is, what it's going for. And I think part of the problem that I have with this movie is the fact that all of the characters feel underdeveloped. And now when a character feels underdeveloped, that's not necessarily the actor's fault because they're just going and running with the best that they can with what they're given. That falls more along the lines of the writer's fault, and I guess the script is kind of where a lot of my issues lie. So for context, a lot of this, the way that the story is set up, you meet the kids in the beginning, you kind of meet the kids' bullies and their arch nemesis, and how that plot line is set up. Parents, of course, in 80s, 90s fashion, exit, set picture, house party's thrown, aliens come. And the story feels like it is very much like a chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. And there's nothing inherently wrong about how the plot develops. I think the plot develops very naturally. It has a natural aggression. My thing about it is that we never get to stay in one portion of the story long enough to actually feel like you're connected to the characters or that you're actually involved as the audience to what is actually taking place on screen. Make no mistake that this movie is a brisk watch. This movie clocks in under 80 minutes and it flies by so quick. And I think some of my issues with this movie as well also lie not only in the fact that this movie is very fast, but the pacing of it is very awkward. So the first two acts feel slower than they actually are, and then by the time you get into the third act, which is supposed to be this climax, this is supposed to be the battle that this entire movie, heck, the entire reason that you're watching this, because the title promises kids versus aliens, and that battle feels so anticlimactic and feels like it leaves just as quick as it stays. And this movie could go down in the year 2023 as having the dumbest, or at least one of the dumbest endings that I've seen from a horror movie in a long time. And I think my problem with it isn't necessarily the way that it ends, is just that it ends very abruptly, and you're just left with so many questions that you're like, what are the creators doing here? Because I feel like this story isn't fleshed out enough yet, and then you just leave us with questions. It's very frustrating in that fact. And here's my love-hate relationship with this movie. I feel like for as much as I have problems with the third act, it's the best portion of the movie. I really do love the brother-sister relationship too that lies at the foot of this story. Dominic Mariche and Phoebe Rex play the brother and sister in this movie, and the two of them just have such a genuine dynamic that you really do believe that they're brother and sister, and they just have this chemistry that a lot of on-screen brothers and sisters, it feels kind of rare to see. But getting back to the third act of this movie, this is where all of the blood and all of the gore kind of come in. I will say that for as much issues as I have with this movie, Kids vs. Aliens does give us one of the most refreshing spins on an alien horror movie we've had in quite some time. I would say that this film feels like by the time you get to the alien aspect of the story, it feels a lot like a distant cousin of Psycho Gorman. But also up until that point, this film kind of positions itself to be like home movies meets Stranger Things. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but by the time the credits roll in this movie, I just kind of felt like all the potential that the third act teased the audience, this movie ends up feeling like another Stranger Things ripoff. And that makes me really sad because honestly, the makeup and practical effects that this movie uses are just spectacular. They are truly a visual sight to see, and again, it just brings such a good twist on the alien horror. Alright, well, I think I have done enough rambling on about my feelings on this movie. Let's run this through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Kids vs. Aliens a 2.5 out of 5. There's a lot that I really loved about this movie. There's a lot that I really hated about this movie. And I think, honestly, this movie probably could have benefited from another 15-20 minutes to kind of flesh out the story and kind of leave the audience with a little bit more of a satisfying ending. But you guys can decide for yourself this upcoming Friday, January 20th, when Shudder and RLJE Films releases Kids vs. Aliens in limited release, and it will, of course, be on the Shudder streaming service later this year. Before we jump into our mental health portion of the video, this is a reminder that if you would like to find out more information about who we are, links to our social media, more movie reviews like this, podcasts, and links to wherever you guys can get your more podcasts like this, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. All of that is going to be in the show notes below, and you guys can also submit your screenplays, short films, and feature films down below as well for our film festival, Horrific Hope, the first festival of its kind to be horror-centric and mental health focused. And shout out to our sponsors for this year's festival, In Convicted Printing, Diabolical DVD, and Fierce Literature. All of their information can be found down below as well. And let's go ahead and talk about mental health. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health out of the film of which we're reviewing and talk about it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. I want to talk about family because family is a cornerstone of what this movie is really about. I know on this channel before I've really kind of talked about the negative effects that family can have on your mental health, but those are toxic situations and also go hand in hand with toxic relationships. And this time, let's talk about the positive effects that family can have. Yes, family is going to always be slightly dysfunctional, and honestly, that's okay. The character journey for our brother and sister characters in this movie, Gary and Samantha, essentially kind of go through this really closeness in the beginning of the film and kind of a separation because of age and just really life stuff happening throughout the course of the film, and then reconnecting in the end of the movie. And a portion of what makes that reconnection so much more effective is because you're kind of understanding the other person's point of view. I think honestly, I've talked about it in the past and kind of how family can have a mental impact on your mental health, but it can also have a positive impact. And that positive impact honestly comes from being patient with one another and learning to see perspective and the importance of seeing perspective and where that other person is coming from at their own season of life. Because much like Gary and Samantha in this movie, they are not only different ages, but they're also in different seasons of life where you have Gary who wants to just be adventurous and be a kid, and he's kind of whimsical. Then on the other hand, you have Samantha who is wanting to be a little bit more mature, hang out with adults her own age. And it kind of takes those characters a long time to kind of see eye to eye and really understand that, hey, like, we're in different portions of our lives. That's okay, and it's going to make us better for it in the end. And I think it really does, and that's part of the reason that I think the ending character journey for as much as I have problems with the ending character journey of these two specific characters works really well. And on the flip side of that also as well, and this is coming from someone that fought all the time with his younger sibling as a teenager, obviously understanding, being immature in our own rights. We were at two different points in our lives, and then once maturity hit and we had also kind of been through our own stuff and through our own things, we're now close, and we now talk more than we did then, and also at the same time we also respect each other a lot more than we ever have at any point in our relationship. And sometimes you just have to let life happen and hope for the best when it comes to these kinds of relationships, not just with family, but also with friends, also with spouses or partners or significant others. Sometimes you just need to let life happen, and sometimes life happens and it tests those relationships, and those relationships are made better because of it. And again, sometimes it also demonstrates to you who is actually a toxic fit for that season of life and who could actually end up ultimately hurting you. And Samantha kind of experiences that with Billy. I think ultimately this just kind of speaks volumes that family is just another kind of relationship that we just need to look at exactly as that. Family can hurt and family can heal the same way that friends, significant others, spouses, or partners can. I hope this was encouraging. So if you haven't called your sibling in a while or shot them a text, just say, hey, I just saw this random stranger on YouTube. Gave me a challenge to text you. So here I am. Well, on that note, Kids vs. Aliens drops in select theaters from RLJE Films and Shudder beginning this Friday, January 20th. And keep your eyes out on it if it's not in your area currently. It will be dropping on Shudder later this year. Make sure that you guys follow us on all of our social media. Hit that subscribe button below. And most importantly, if you or anyone you know is struggling with any of the topics that I've talked about or addressed in this video, check out our mental health resource library below.